Sure, no,
for my time's sake.
Sure, I understand where you're coming from, but it's not just Canada. We're also seeing, and there are reports suggesting that there is some sort of unease within the Biden administration as well. Hamas came out and said that it's Biden really that is, or America that should be held wholly responsible for what is transpiring at the hospitals in Gaza. There are reports that are suggesting that the United States is also under pressure from a lot of its Arab allies, because they see that
who cares what Hamas says?
Sure,
they started this war.
Sure.
So I don't really think the Biden administration really cares what Hamas says in terms of who's blood on their hands. There's one group.
But like I said, there are some Arab allies as well and there are interests in the region for many of these countries, including the United States.
We saw Turkey call Israel a terrorist state yesterday. I don't think that anyone takes Turkey seriously, to be completely honest. It's not like they're, I mean, we are looking towards the end of the fighting of one front of this war. There's obviously always going to be public pressures that are done and different things that are done in the background as well. But I think one thing that has been made very clear and will become even more clear is how, what will become more clear is how many war crimes or double, triple, quadruple war crimes were committed, given the amount of civilian infrastructure we've now seen that Hamas's military wing has been embedded inside of. And not only that, there have been reports from the field that people are leaving their keys in their homes so that Hamas is able to enter their homes to hide. As well, there have been whole houses, from what I understand, that have been built on top of the entrances of these tunnels. And they're not actually houses, they're just entrances to look like they're civilian residences, but that are actually tunnel entrances. So
and those tunnels have been being built for the last few years, is what we're now learning. So there are questions that are being raised as to how Israel's intelligence failed to even look into that, if they've been building these tunnels below hospitals, below schools, below UN buildings for the past decade or so. But I want to get in Sushant Sareen as well, and we're talking about the larger ramifications of this. Just a few weeks ago, we had, just a few days ago, in fact, we had Benjamin Netanyahu go on to say that this is going to be a long-drawn war, and our aim is to finish it come what may. But at what cost are we going to see that? And for how long, in your opinion, is this going to be dragging on for?
Poonam, I think it's very difficult for anybody to say how long this is going to drag on for. It depends on how quickly, at least insofar as Hamas is concerned, the Israelis are successful in degrading them and eliminating these guys, finishing off this organization. I think that will be the critical measure, because that is the objective which Israel has set for itself. But look, I've always maintained that Hamas at the end of the day is not just an organization, it's a mindset, it's an ideology. And I think one of the greatest failures of the Western world since 9/11, and even before that, in fact, before that they were in denial, but post 9/11, I think the greatest failure of the Western world has been that they simply haven't understood the phenomena which they are up against. And Hamas is only a manifestation of that jihadist phenomena which is sweeping through the world, in large parts of the world actually. So I don't know what we are going to do about that, because at the end of it, a lot of the problems in the Middle East emanate from this particular poisonous ideology, and nobody has done anything to address it. Nobody has done anything to dismantle it. You can dismantle an organization. How do you dismantle that ideology? Until you fight it. And when I look at the Western world and the discourse in the Western world, and also the division within the Western world between what's happening on the street and what's happening in the corridors of power, just as we see that in the Arab world, where I disagree with you, Poonam. I think bulk of the Arab world is not very unhappy about the treatment that is being meted out to Hamas. There might be some disquiet on how the war is being prosecuted, on whether there are going to be too many civilian casualties or collateral damage. But I think most Arab states are very happy to see the back of Hamas. It's the Arab street there is a dissonance between the Arab states and the Arab street. Forget Turkey. Turkey is not important. Forget Canada. I think Justin Trudeau is a travesty of a leader. But in bulk of the Western countries, I think there is an understanding that you have to get rid of organizations like Hamas. But I don't think there's sufficient recognition on how do you address that ideology, which we see play out on the streets of many of these Western countries.
Right, and I want to get in Edward P. Joseph as well. You know, like Sushant Sareen was pointing out, and many other experts would also say that a lot of this is because Western powers have failed to see the inherent issue here. They sort of glossed over it for decades together, which is why we've reached the point that we've reached here. Would you agree?
Well, first, let me say good to be with you, the other guests, and your viewers as well. And let me return to your original question, which are allies now changing tune, as I see the streamer across the screen. And I would agree with those speakers who said no, actually. They're not changing their tune towards this. Let me just, as I'm here in Washington, try to interpret the Biden administration position. President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, anyone, any of us who is a human being with any heart has to be deeply troubled, first by the suffering of Palestinian civilians, and of course by the prospect of innocents in a hospital being caught in a crossfire, as the administration has cautioned, and this heartbreaking situation for Palestinian babies, and that's. Any normal sentient human being has to have that concern. And so President Biden and the State Department are reflecting that in their messaging and their messages to Israel. At the same time, they're very aware of reality. And this is the larger question here is if we are concerned, as we should be, about Palestinian suffering and ensuring the safety of Palestinians, the question is who bears the responsibility for that? And obviously Israel does have responsibility, but not sole responsibility. That's the key point here, and that's what the United States is conveying. And we heard that from the State Department spokesman in very clear terms, saying, what about Hamas's responsibility here? And why didn't Hamas accept the offer from Israel to provide fuel directly for the hospitals, and stating very clearly, the State Department spokesman stating yesterday that Hamas should vacate the hospitals. And let's remind your viewers here that to use a hospital as a site for military operations by Hamas, this is under the Geneva Conventions, this is formally a war crime. And that does not mean, of course, that Israel has no responsibility. And that's what the United States is trying to remind Israel, that this is a very difficult, complex dilemma.
Yes.
So everyone, of course, has to be concerned about the Palestinians in those hospitals. At the same time, the U.S. has not moved away. So it's not true there's a change in tone. The U.S. has not moved away from holding Hamas accountable here. And ultimately, we want to see this fighting and suffering end. It's actually not very complicated. Not complicated at all. Hamas only has to release the hostages and leave. The leadership leave. And there are prominent Israeli voices who say that ends the war. Not just this situation at the hospital, that ends the war. Please.
Yes, because many of those